Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Facebook Live town hall with our city manager, Erik Walsh. Erik, welcome. I'm glad you're here.
No, thanks for inviting me.
So, Erik, we're going to be talking today about, your perspective on the pandemic and what it means for San Antonio, what you've been doing, and what people should be expecting from us going forward. But I want to start off, first of all, by asking you a very personal question. How's your family? How's it been to be a dad throughout this entire problem?
It's been good. The family's doing good. I mean, everybody's adjusted to school at home, but just like everybody else in this country, we're all adjusting and a little bit of cabin fever at times, and try to keep it lively. But my wife does a great job of holding down the Walsh household, so very appreciative of that.
So I'm in my office up on the north side of town in my law office. I know that you're at City Hall right now, but I hadn't been to City Hall in about 2 weeks because, I've been doing the social distancing thing, but it's kind of a ghost town down there in downtown. And how do you think this whole crisis looks like from the perspective of the 12,000 plus people who work for you?
Yeah, that, it looks very differently for a lot of them. We've got, of course, with police and fire and public health departments that are directly involved in the pandemic response. Looks very different than the other 2,400 city employees who are remote working.
Yeah.
And then we've got a third category of employees who are continuing to do their job, like public works and traffic management and large elements of our parks and recreation department. But there's a fourth category of employee who has been redeployed to do other things.
Yeah.
Because what their normal job has been impacted either by closure of facilities or the circumstances, and we've moved employees to do things in the community that need taken care of. So very differently.
So a lot of people are going through something that I don't even think they ever anticipated. And I know that your emergency response teams that you command and that you work with. The Metro Health Department and the Fire Department and Police Department. Is this something y'all ever practiced for?
Councilman, that's a really good question. We have, like any other city in the state, we're required to have emergency plans, and we had a plan for pandemic flu.
Mm-hmm.
And it was last updated after H1N1, what is that, 8-9 years ago?
Sure. But
I can tell you that pandemic plan nowhere near prepared us for the real pandemic. And I think that's probably something that a lot of local governments and even state governments are going to be rewriting how you manage through a pandemic, a real pandemic. It's hard to scale and scope, the what if. And the scale hasn't been felt in this country since 1918.
Yeah. Well, Erik, so much of this pandemic, impacts people on a personal basis, right? And their family is impacted, and they're making sacrifices. And we keep hearing about people getting sick and all that. But your job isn't just to deliver basic services, but it's also to manage the city's dollars. Right. And our budget is roughly, más o menos, about $3 billion. What kind of hit should the city of San Antonio expect from this coronavirus when it comes to the city budget?
Well, we are anticipating through all our lines of business just a little south of $200 million. But those are projections. I mean, this week we will receive our sales tax check for the month of March. So generally our CPS revenue, our SAWS revenue, our sales tax revenue, we collect a month or 2 months in arrears. And so while businesses saw the impact immediately on their cash flow, we had to really rely upon good projections. And because there isn't, we can't even really go back to the 2008, 2009 recession to examine, what happened, because, never before have we had to shut down businesses, and really impact people's lives. But we're projecting $200 million. And I think one of the things that we did early on, Councilman, is we made adjustments to our spending immediately. And that frankly gave us a little bit of breathing room in this fiscal year. And I'll say that, for example, I know the city of Dallas today, their council is hearing an update on their budget and changes and adjustments. And we did it a month ago. We slowed spending. We implemented a hiring freeze. We suspended programs that we needed to do, both not only in the general fund, but really in our hotel occupancy tax fund, our convention center area, where we saw revenue really just drop off the cliff.
Erik, for those folks who are watching us at home, like for example, Charlie Moak says hello, and he's there. Why should somebody like Susie and Charlie Moak or Kim Ambers, who are also watching us, why should they care about what's happening to the city budget? How does that impact them?
First of all, I think people should care that we reacted quickly.
Yes.
And we prioritized 3 areas. One, the spending for the response, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. 2, the spending for what a recovery looks like. And 3, basic operations. And I think it really forces us to look at what's essential and non-essential. And I completely anticipate, and I've shared this with council a couple of times, as we go into May and June in the preparation for 2021, my sense is that we will be dealing with the aftermath and the impacts of this for the next 2 or 3 cycles, which ultimately impacts services for the city. And really the council will need to determine, what is that. There's going to be a prioritization we're all going to have to go through. What's essential and what's not essential. And I think everybody's scope of what that looks like is going to be redefined. I mean, if I asked you that question 75 days ago, I might get a different answer than what I'm going to get in June, knowing what we know.
Yeah. And so the way that it impacts people's daily lives, I think may best be exemplified by the question that we're getting from Sylvia Thiebel. And she asks, hey, we need to clean up the trash in a parking lot between, 2 restaurants. So, I mean, in order to pick up trash, it's not just a matter of deploying a truck, right, and telling some fellas pick it up, but there's a cost to every single, one of those, the equipment, the people who are going there. And so how are you, the city manager and city council, going to arrive at what we need to do to make up for the $200 million that we're not going to be able to count on?
I think we're going to have to define what's essential. I mean, we are going to just like every business in this country that is contracting, we're gonna have to contract. It's gonna be much harder than what we saw in 2008, 2009. But I think the staying focused on the 3 things I mentioned, recovery, response, and basic operations will be a good guide. And I would say that Sylvia, if there's an issue there off of Babcock and Hebner, you can still call 311. I mean, that's a basic operation, and I'd encourage people to continue to do that. Yeah. There are some things that the city has to keep doing. They're required, and the public expects it.
So, Erik, you and I and your team and the rest of City Council, we've been sending word up to Washington, D.C. About, the San Antonio story, how COVID is impacting us, our budget shortfall, and all that. And I want to talk to you about something that happened to you. And you called me one day and said, hey, Councilman, I just found $270 million in the bank account.
Well, I didn't say it quite like that.
Talk to me a little bit about that, because that's an important sum of money, and we got a check. Actually, it was a direct deposit to the city's account, right, for 270
Right.
million. What is that money? Why did we get it? How did we get it? What are you going to use it for?
So part of the Coronavirus Relief Act that Congress approved and the president signed provided direct expense relief for all major urban centers in the country over a population of 500,000, and then all the other counties and cities and towns in this country. Money was sent to each of the 50 states, and the guidelines for that money is that it cannot be used for revenue loss. I mean, I just mentioned that we're anticipating $200 million in revenue loss, which will impact our spending, but you can't use any of this money for making up revenue loss. Number two, this money has to be spent on um, direct COVID-related expenses that weren't budgeted anywhere. And three, all of this has to be spent, or whatever can be spent, must be out the door for any services that are incurred by December 30th of this year. And
So
so that's the guideline that we're operating under right now.
yeah, and so I think the takeaway for folks at home, I'm hoping that they heard loud and clear that the federal government did send and did respond to our request for funds, but they put a big condition on that, and that one of those big conditions was you can't use it to make up for budget shortfalls. You can only use it for responding to the crisis, right? And so, Erik, that means that we're still going to have to figure out how to make up for a $200 million shortfall, right?
Yes, it does. It really does.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the part we're going to need to work on through May and June.
And on top of that, you're still going to have to work on also, the existing crises that we face in San Antonio. We're still in the grips of an opioid crisis. We're still in the grips of a domestic violence crisis. We still have, transportation and transit. I mean, as soon as everybody goes back to work, I have a feeling that I-10, 410, 1604 are going to be just as obnoxious as they always have been, right? So, Erik, I certainly don't envy you. And while everybody's been talking COVID, your job is to make sure that you're not just responding to catastrophe, but that you're also delivering on the services and solving problems every day. So my question for you is, do you ever sleep?
Yes. There's a little window every 24 hours. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and really, it brings me to my topic, and I know that I wasn't planning on talking about it with you, but we do have a mental health conversation that's happening in the background, right, in San Antonio. Opioid, domestic violence, people out there who are lonely, who are staying home, homeless folks. That's a big, mental health is a big umbrella topic, and we're going to be focusing on that, going forward. Right now, Erik, are we doing anything to address mental health during COVID? Is that a conversation you're having with your team?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there are, a lot of the call centers that we've set up as individuals are calling for assistance or information. We've started to incorporate whether or not there are additional services needed. And the call centers that we've redeployed employees to have been a huge success. And fortunately, we have the space at some of our locations that have been closed down to really set up. But we're trying to incorporate that in. I think your point, though, Councilman, is that the mental health or domestic violence we knew were issues 75 days ago.
Right.
They are going to be more of an issue going forward because of the conditions people have had to go through, and it's created family pressures and mental health pressures that I think we're going to need to figure out how to deal with as a community. And it's going to be, they could be a lot more important than they were 75 days ago. I mean, everybody is having a hard time with this. And I think there are going to be some lasting impacts of this whenever this moves to the next phase that we don't know about, and that we're going to have to keep our finger to the pulse of.
Eric, and there's one crowd of folks that are particularly vulnerable, and those are our homeless San Antonians. Even though they don't have homes, they're still San Antonians. And I know that we've been having a lot of conversations. 75 days ago, we were having conversations about managing the homeless crisis that we've got in San Antonio in a different way, and really putting together a new strategy. All of that kind of came to a big screeching halt with COVID, but can you talk to folks about, what we've been doing to take care of our homeless population during the crisis?
Yeah. So early on, when the term social distancing started getting thrown around, one of the areas or some of the facilities that were dealing with it firsthand were our homeless shelters, the Salvation Army, Haven for Hope, GI Forum. And in order to ensure proper social distancing, they needed more space, and they actually started to close their doors to new folks unless it was a family that showed up, and they would make arrangements. We took part of our original money that we received from the federal government through the CDBG fund, and worked with our homeless providers to contract with a downtown hotel to move some of the vulnerable population that existed at GI Forum and Haven for Hope, and move them out of that situation. I think we're learning now that these congregate settings, whether it's a nursing home or the jail, or in my case, a fire station, these congregate settings, someone who's positive can spread it very quickly. I think that's been a good news story. There is an element that exists on the streets of San Antonio, where we have individuals, because the doors of those homeless shelters have been shut in case of emergency, though, that individuals are kind of outdoors, and I think the thinking is that they're not in a congregate setting. What we have had to do is spin up and provide feeding, because many of the wonderful churches and organizations that help with feeding have not had the ability to do that. The city has stepped in and created 4 different feeding hubs where we go out there on a daily basis, and make sure that individuals have access to food and hygiene kits.
Yes.
So making sure that they're taken care of, and I think that's going to be another area where we're going to need to look to see in the future how we deal with that, because if the coronavirus is here to stay, those congregate settings are always going to be susceptible to that type of spread.
Eric, and food hubs, I think is a really interesting segue into what these task forces are doing. The mayor and the county judge got together and they impaneled task forces. Each one, was going to be led by county commissioners, city council members, and then folks from, private sectors. And there's multiple groups, and one of those groups I think is in charge of food and social services. Others in charge of housing. One that I lead is in charge of government relations. Can you talk to us a little bit about how these groups, what they're doing and what wins they're bringing home for San Antonio, or what they're accomplishing?
Yeah, that's that's a really great example of how we're working together with the county and other major stakeholders in the community. It's really a community response, and you're right. There's a social services working group, there's a food and shelter working group, and there's a business and employment working group, and then federal and state advocacy, the one that you co-chair. And the intent of those work groups is to quickly digest and determine what are the things we need to do quickly as a community, working jointly with our other partners. And 2 quick success stories. One was the emergency housing relief fund that council approved 2 weeks ago. That same week, the county approved their program. They're both the exact same program, but one is designed for city residents, the other one designed for county residents. No difference. Another example is the hotel I just mentioned. I mean, literally, we talked about it on a Monday. There was a call over a weekend. We talked about it on Monday. There was a briefing with the working group Monday afternoon. We briefed the city council at our Tuesday briefings, and we signed the contract 2 days later. So we knew we needed to move quickly, and as long as we're coordinating and keeping an eye on things that need to be done quickly, then we can move quickly as government, which is important.
Yeah, and Erik, you mentioned this, housing and risk mitigation and all that. One of the things that I know folks are very, very worried about is that because they haven't been able to go to work, that they're not going to have money to be able to pay for rent. And if they don't have money to pay for rent, there's going to be evictions, right? I know that we've partnered up with a county, and Nelson Wolf has protected tenants to a large degree by putting a moratorium on evictions. But that conversation is still ongoing, right? It's not like we're going to say, hey, emergency declaration order lifted, and everything's going to be okay from now on, because we know we're going to be living with not just the virus, but the ripple effects of the virus, during these last 3 months is going to be felt for years to come. So is there a conversation happening right now about what we're going to be doing, not just for tenants, but for small businesses and all that going forward, to make sure that, the blow is softened, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, and actually that's on tomorrow's agenda. I mean, I mentioned to the council last week that part of the briefing tomorrow is going to be what is the CARES Act. Again, we've briefed the council about that before. We've gotten additional guidance and kind of reorient the council on a couple of things, three things really. First, kind of our budget calendar for May and June for the 2021 budget. Two, the coronavirus, the Corona Relief Fund, that money we talked about earlier, and what are the types of things that we can spend that money on? What are the eligible expenses? And then three, kind of a proposed structure or plan on developing something that we can bring before council, give council an opportunity to provide some input, kind of a mini process, and finalize that quickly within the next 30 days, and get to exactly what you're describing. The guidelines talk about how assistance can be provided for small businesses. Well, what does that mean? What should it mean? And we've got a little bit of a springboard with the economic transition team report that came to the council, but that's part of the briefing tomorrow morning to council.
So talk to us a little bit about the economic transition team report. What is that, and what is this team?
So that was part two. Part one was the health transition team that was pulled together by the city and the county, the mayor and the county judge, of medical experts to really provide city leaders and the community an idea of what the roadmap should be if we are going to have health guidelines dictate what we do and how we open up San Antonio. Part two was the economic transition team, which was a group, again, impaneled by the mayor and the county judge, to look at specific sectors. And it was really kind of a playbook that sectors of our economy, whether they're restaurants or light manufacturing or office professional settings, what are those things that those employers should do to, one, regain customer confidence, that there's a clean environment, that establishment is taking good care of their customers, but also their employees. And it's kind of a step-by-step process of things that they should do. It builds upon the governor's plan. It's probably a little bit more detailed and I think useful that any business in town can take a look at if they don't know where to start. And that was presented to the council and commissioners court this past Tuesday.
Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, you've read the report. I'm sure you've gone through it. Did you find anything in there that's surprising or that people should be keeping their eye on?
Well, I was on the economic transition team because as the city manager, we have plenty of facilities And so, I think what I like about it is that there's a level of consistency, and really, we're the team is challenging the community to take the pledge to create a safer San Antonio, and whether that is safe for the employees or customers, I think branding that and getting all businesses and employers to stand by that will be a good thing for our community. And there's nothing wrong with consistency. Everybody's going to be nervous about this, and so we need to make people comfortable.
Erik, we saw in the newspaper that the city's, plans and strategies are clashing with Governor Abbott's announcements. How do you feel about that word clash? Are we clashing? Are we conflicting? Are we in a big fight?
No, we're not. I mean, it's been hand in glove, I think, since the very beginning. I mean, and I think you have to appreciate the fact that the governor is setting standards statewide,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with us taking an added level approach for our own community, and that's what it's really been working well together, I think.
Have you heard the complaints? I've heard them too. That, oh my gosh, Ron Nierenberg and the city council and the city manager have just issued orders that are superseded and by the governor's orders, and we're doing something that we should not be doing or not allowed to be doing. How do you respond to those folks?
I don't. Well, I think there's a lot of consternation because we're never before have we been under a national declaration,
Yeah.
state declaration, and a local declaration, and it's really been incumbent upon, I think, a lot of local governments to make sure that they're adhering to the standards set forth by the governor. And you see on the news, there's plenty of other states in this country where there are clashes, I think.
Yeah.
But I think I can speak for the big cities. I think there's been a lot of cohesive attention paid to those things.
And I just want to let folks know, this is not something that we just, decide what direction the wind is blowing in and, just sort of randomly start making decisions. I mean, we've got a very large team of lawyers, who look at all these things. And, I'm a lawyer too, and we are complying with the governor's orders, and there's no real daylight between what we've done and what he's doing, right?
No, there isn't. And when he adjusts, we adjust.
Yeah.
And that's the order of which it should happen.
Yeah. So one of the plans, Erik, is that we're going to be handing out, helping folks by handing out thermometers and hand sanitizers and masks. And so Oyram Leal is asking, how are we going to allocate those packets of thermometers, sanitizers, and masks? And how can he, as a small business owner, get his hands on one of those?
So, Mr. Leal, if you will pay close attention to our website over the next couple of days, we're going to be putting information out there. That way you can register. We're working on a distribution plan. About half of that inventory has already been received by the city, and we're waiting for the other half potentially by early next week. And then we'll be getting that information out. We're also going to be relying upon volunteers that are going to be organized through our local chambers to help distribute that. We know, as someone who has been trying to be on the front end of procuring sanitizer and masks for our workforce, it's a challenge. And the idea was that we thought that we would try to make it easier for small businesses to get a hold of that stuff because it's really difficult right now.
Yeah. Hey, Erik, we've been seeing play out on TV, and it happened in San Antonio and it happened in Austin and other state capitals. People who are, marching around without their masks saying, things like the virus was fake all along. The scientists don't know what they're talking about. It's not that bad. You as a city manager, what do you think about large groups of people gathering together without masks, right now?
I wouldn't advise it. And I don't think it's a good example to set.
Yeah.
I think the masks are there to protect the community, probably more so than yourself. And I think I think we all have an obligation to protect our community.
So, this advice that you give to folks, hey, wear your mask. The governor is echoing that as well. I got to read his orders and his most recent orders and this really great report that accompanied his orders. And there's 6 or 7 times in that report that says stay home if you can. Wear your mask. Try to maintain as much social distancing as possible. And I think there's a lot of folks out there who just heard we're opening restaurants again, and didn't read the rest of it. The governor and certainly nobody out there is saying don't take this seriously, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And
go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to add that one element I think that I think everybody has to be prepared for is that regardless of what the governor or the mayor or the county judge say, individual businesses on private property could require their customers to wear masks to come in. It's like the old no shirt, no shoes, no service.
Right.
I mean, so that decision can become granular at an establishment level on private property.
Yeah. So I have I keep giving folks advice too, right? Wear your mask, wash your hands, stay 6 feet away from each other. But it's not, Eric, I know that you think I'm very, very smart, but the reality is I just listen to very smart people like Dr. Don Emmerich and Dr. Bridger. And so can you talk to us a little bit about the expertise of the folks on your team on whom you're relying to help inform you as you make decisions?
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned 2 of the major players in our organization. Dr. Colleen Bridger, the former public health director, now an assistant city manager, Dr. Emmerich, who has not had much of a honeymoon with our organization. She started at the beginning of February, and what happened 3 days later, we got a plane load of Americans from China who had been evacuated. So Dr. Junda Wu, our medical director, our public health authority, Dr. Anita Kurian, who has a background in epidemiology, Rita Espinosa, our chief epidemiologist. I mean, and they've been surrounded by a very capable, effective fire department that knows how to respond to emergencies. It's a great team. One thing that I think sets us apart, and I got this question earlier today from a congressman. One of the things that I think that is different for our community is that we have a really good working relationship with the hospital systems in town, and which is really needed in a case like this. And I think that's really set us apart. So those are the folks that are really have been grinding it out since the beginning of February, not since the middle of March when the orders started coming out, but dealing with the Lackland evacuees and ensuring safety of the community back then. We're very fortunate.
Eric, do you remember the good old days when the biggest problem we had in San Antonio was a group of evacuees in Lackland?
That feels like 10 years ago.
It does. Hey, Eric, right now, I think most people will agree that things are getting better, right? And we heard from Don Emmerich saying that, flattening the curve, it looks like exactly what we're doing right now. And all of these measures seem to be working. But there is a possibility for wave number 2. And, what do we do? If in fact this virus decides that it's not finished with San Antonio yet?
Well, and I think, I saw the news earlier that the governor even talked a little bit about that in his briefing with the legislators. We have to be prepared. I think reemphasizing social distancing and washing your hands and those good, smart measures that we can take as individuals are going to be important. I think as a community right now, we're focusing on testing asymptomatic folks in congregate settings, the nursing homes, the jail, any other sort of congregate setting. Our testing as a community is continuing to increase. I sent out, there was a news release sent out today. We're going to be doing testing at Las Palmas Library and Woodlawn Lake over the next 3 or 4 days to make it convenient for folks that that may need to get tested. So all that needs to continue ramping up, and we need to be prepared, because if there is a spike and local conditions warrant that there's a pressure on the hospital systems, then we may need to take additional action here locally.
Erik, one of the things that some of us have read in the newspaper and seen on our favorite news stations is that we had some police officers and firefighters who also tested positive for this. Can you tell us about how those professionals on our team are doing, and what you've told SAPD and our firefighters about what you expect from them during this difficult time and what you anticipate will be happening?
Yeah. So we've had a total of 18 city employees, 6 police officers, 6 firefighters, and 6 civilians. Fortunately, 5 of the 6 police officers are back to work. None of our firefighters are back to work, and some of our civilians are back to work. It's been a long process for those as individuals, and just like we've seen on the news, they were all impacted differently. What I've asked the employees to do, and I think it's been really key for me to make sure I'm constantly communicating to all 12,000 employees, but we need to take care of each other. We need to be smart. Our job is to take care of the community and whatever our role at the city is. The firefighters are responding to calls. Every call, whether it's a traffic accident or any sort of other medical emergency, they have to treat as if it's a potential COVID exposure. And they need to be very careful. We've made some adjustments in our policies to keep the employees safe. PPE and ensuring that they have enough PPE is critical. This is not going to go away anytime soon. So I continue to see that as we go forward, a lot of the things we put in place may have to stay in place for at least the short term to ensure the safety of our workforce. If we're not safe and we're not taking care of those employees, and they're not available to take care of the community.
Yeah, and you deliver essential services. You deliver sewer and infrastructure and police and fire services and road repair and all that. But there's a lot of folks out there who took offense, and I think rightly so, when they heard that their business and the company for whom they work is not essential. I've spent a lot of time over the past 70 days saying, look, essential is a word that we're using, exclusively with regards to this one virus, but it doesn't really mean you're not essential. And I think that a lot is lost sometimes between, the technical speak and, what we really mean. And so have you, I know that you've got a communications team, led by Jeff Coyle and all those folks. And, talk to me about the job that your team is doing with, educating folks and giving them reliable information.
Yeah, and we have redeployed a lot of employees that do public relations or public information over to our government and public affairs division. One of the things early on, it was Friday, March 13th. Mm-hmm. I had a call with a couple other city managers from large cities on the West Coast, and the city manager of San Jose, who had been dealing with this for about 3 weeks mm-hmm. ahead of Texas, told me, take your public affairs people and multiply times 10, because that's how many people you're going to need to make sure the proper messaging is going out. And we've tried to make it easy for folks to understand. We've tried to push out information in a timely manner. Information is critical. Data is critical. And I would say that our data sets that we've got online that we update at 7 o'clock every night, go take a look at any other city or major county in this country. And we're pushing more data out because people really want to understand that. They want to understand the messaging. When we started including masks in our orders or the advisement to wear masks, we took the extra step of putting 11 by 17 PDFs online so that businesses could print them out themselves and put them on their doors to make it easy for folks. So we've kind of had to think how we can be nimble in terms of that messaging and helpful.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know that you've got a hard stop at 7 p.m. Because, you're running the 7th largest city in the United States. And this time that you've shared with us is very, very valuable. And so, I was going to ask you one last question, but I think I'd like to just give you the opportunity to make a closing argument. If you want people to remember, one or two things, and to communicate those one or two things to their neighbors and their coworkers and their families, what are those, Erik? What do you want people to really, really not forget?
Number one, there are 12,000 city employees that are here to serve the community and will do the job and go above and beyond for our community. They're committed, and I've seen it firsthand for the last 7 weeks. I knew we had a good workforce. The last 7 weeks have solidified in my mind that we're really here to serve the community. So that's the first thing. Number two is that everybody take on a little bit of responsibility as a member of our community to keep themselves safe, their families safe, and their community safe. However that looks, we've all got to do our part. But I can guarantee you that I've got 12,000 employees that are going to do their very best for our community and go above and beyond. And you know what? This week just happens to be a Public Service Recognition Week.
I love it.
And that recognizes federal, state, county, or municipal employees. And there's there have been a lot of great examples of our workforce going above and beyond, and I'm hopeful and confident that service is going to continue to ride high.
Yeah, and so tell me if you disagree with this, but I've been telling folks that in a time of crisis, the word community stops being a noun and it starts being a verb. Right?
Yeah.
It's when we all have to start doing for each other and taking care of each other. And Erik, if somebody's got any questions about COVID, how your team is responding to it, if they suspect they might have COVID, I know that we have a hotline where people can call. Can you share that with us?
You know what? It's easier. Just call 311 and they can refer you over to it. Okay,
so anybody with a question can call 311, and there's folks that are answering 24/7, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then lastly, I know that, there's a nightly video, conference with the mayor and the judge. Somebody said to me, well, I only watched one. I imagine they're just saying the same thing over and over and over again every single night. But that's not true. I mean, my understanding is that members of your team are explaining different topics and all that. Why should people watch those?
I think they get the latest developments for the day, and you're getting it consistently at the same time every day. You get the latest updates. Tonight, for example, I think Judge Wolf brought in Sheriff Salazar to talk about how he's dealing with the jail, which all of us should care about, because that's not prison over there. That's county jail. So there's people coming and going all the time, and the county is working hard to manage through that situation. So every night is somebody different.
Yeah, and even though they're in custody, they're San Antonians too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Erik, this is what we do, Erik. I've been interviewing folks all week long. Actually, for the past 75 days, we've been doing a lot of this Facebook Live. You did great, Erik. I know that you were very nervous, that you're shy about public speaking, but I don't think you screwed it up at all.
Well, let me just can I ask one question? Am I the only guest you've had that obviously needs a haircut?
There you go, folks. Erik needs a haircut, and now it is, there's video recorded proof out there. During these 75 days, Erik has not received a haircut. Hey, Erik, on May 14th, I'm going to be interviewing your deputy city manager, Maria Villagomez, and assistant city manager Rod Sanchez, to talk to us really granularly about the budget. and how COVID has, impacted our budget and what we're going to be doing to respond to that. So thank you in advance for not scaring them and letting them know that this is an easy thing. It's just a conversation with the public.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
thank you for lending them to us. Ladies and gentlemen, your city manager, Erik Walsh. Erik, get to work. You got to go do some important stuff.
Roger that.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you,
Thank you,
Councilman.
folks. It was nice talking to you.